What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you some winners and losers from the recent Julio Jones trade. He's on his way from the ATL to the Tennessee Titans in exchange for a future second as well as a future third. Also, Tennessee is going to get a sixth back down the line, but you know the details. You've seen it on Twitter or other videos or whatever your main source of football consumption is. You know the details. Today I'm going to be talking about 3 winners and 3 losers in my eyes from this trade. And of course, these are just my winners and losers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the trade and who won, who lost the trade, both players as well as the teams themselves. And let me know what you think of it down in the comment section. Give me a couple winners, give me a couple losers. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I respond to just about every comment on all my videos. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing if you want more sports content in your life like this. Speaking of subscribers, we just passed 75, so figured I'd take this opportunity to remind everybody, once we hit 100, and then every 100 subs after that, I will be giving away a $25 gift card. All you have to do is be subscribed to the channel. I'll make a video about the giveaway, comment that, the way to contact you, and you have an opportunity to come away with $25 PSN or Xbox card, or I can just give you a $25 Visa card, whatever your preference is. So, thank you all for getting us to 75. If you're new to the channel, want an opportunity to come away with a $25 gift card and like my content, please consider subscribing. But without further ado, let's jump into it. Winner number 1, the Tennessee Titans. I mean, don't overthink this one. You won't see the Falcons on this list because they were kind of in a spot where they were stuck between a rock and a hard place, but the Tennessee Titans just got themselves the number 2 wide receiver that they desperately needed. I mean, he's a huge upgrade over Josh Reynolds, and it takes away among my biggest concerns with Tennessee, right? Like, they lost Jonnu Smith, they lost Corey Davis. I was worried about how reliant they'd be on Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill hooking up with A.J. Brown, and then hoping that your defense got better. But I think the defense is going to be better. But then I was worried about what could happen if A.J. Brown got hurt, or if something happened to Derrick Henry. And of course, if you lose your quarterback, that changes the complexion of your season, no doubt about it. But now you have an opportunity where it's not all just A.J. Brown being Superman. You have another wide receiver, and you have another great wide receiver opposite of him. And when it comes to talent, this might be the most talented wide receiver, pure wide receiver duo in the NFL. If you want to have Kelsey and Hill as like a pass catcher duo, I might be inclined to give them the edge, but A.J. Brown and Julio Jones make up one of the top 3 pass catching duos in the league, in my opinion. So obviously a big W for the Titans. Solidifies that offense as well as hopefully an improved defense. If you're a Titans fan, all that lines up to a good chance to win the AFC South. And that, on that note, transitions us to loser number 1, the Indianapolis Colts. Look, I'm already kind of low on the Colts, and I didn't think it was really that close between the Titans and the Colts, even though I had my questions and my concerns about the Titans. The Colts definitely are now in the second fiddle of that division, and they still have a pathway, and I still recognize I'm lower on them than many others. I just think they can't keep up with the Titans, especially when you talk about pass catchers and that offensive production. The offensive line is going to be really good in Indy. Carson Wentz, probably going to be better than he was last year, but without an elite number 1 wide receiver, like I said, this is the team that needed Julio the most, in my opinion. Had they gotten Julio, I might have been flipping the script here just a little bit, because they also have a good defense, and Frank Reich, Matt Eberflus, head coach, defensive coordinator, respectively, great football minds. But instead, he goes to your division rival, and it solidifies Titans as the frontrunner in the AFC South, and that is a very bad division. It's not going to see 2 teams make the playoffs, so if you don't win the division, probably not making the playoffs. I could be wrong. I know I'm low on the Colts, but I think it's just the division winner coming out of the AFC South. And when the Titans get Julio, it makes the chances the Colts win the division that much more slim. On to winner number 2. Again, this is an easy one. Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown. Kind of like we were talking about earlier. If something happened to A.J. Brown, this might be the worst wide receiver room in the NFL. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. I'm going to be doing some position rankings, and I want to do pass catching cores, because I think a lot of it is more than just a one-man show, though obviously Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas have proved it can be just on one guy. Regardless, if something happened to A.J. Brown, Josh Reynolds is not carrying you far, you know, like, and he'd be the most talented guy in the room. I mean, it'd get to the point where if A.J. Brown got hurt, you know, like Ryan Tannehill might be a better wide receiver than some of the guys in the room. For those who didn't know, that's what Ryan Tannehill originally went to Texas A&M to play, was wide receiver. Kind of a joke, kind of serious. But now A.J. Brown has an awesome opposite wide receiver. And we saw how good he was with Corey Davis on their side. And Davis is a pretty good player. He was like a B caliber player, maybe B minus. Julio Jones is still an A. If he's playing, he's an A. Like, he's a stud. So I think that makes it that much easier for A.J. Brown to have a successful 2021 season. He's not going to be seeing as many double I don't know if you can double team either one of those guys because of how good the other guy is. And for Ryan Tannehill, it's insurance if anything happens to A.J. Brown, but also, dude, off of play action, you're tossing it up to A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, and not even just tossing up. Those guys are great route runners. They know how to get open in the middle of the field. Like, Ryan Tannehill is going to put up some gaudy numbers. I don't think they'll throw the football enough for him to have like an MVP season. When it comes to efficiency, Ryan Tannehill right now is probably my front runner. Not that anybody cares about this, but he would be my front runner right now for the QB that might end up with the best efficiency stat at the end of the year. Like him with the Mahomes and the Rodgers, which is crazy because do you look at Ryan Tannehill and say he's as good as Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers? No, and that's no disrespect to Ryan Tannehill. He's a very good NFL quarterback, and that's much more than I could say. But I think when it comes to an efficiency standpoint, he's going to carve himself a role with those elite top 2, 3, 4 guys with, Brady I didn't even mention, but Rodgers and Mahomes as well. At least as of right now. And man, Tannehill, Brown, huge winners of this Julio Jones trade going to Tennessee. On to loser number 2, other side of the coin, Matt Ryan. I mean, Matt Ryan is still putting up good numbers. I thought Atlanta should have gone QB at 4, but Matt Ryan is still a very solid NFL quarterback. But a lot of that is because he plays in an offense that had an abundance of weapons around him. And when you added Kyle Pitts to it, I was thinking, you could do a lot of creative things with Pitts. You can move Ridley around. You can move Julio around. You have Arthur Smith coming in. Matt Ryan's going to put up some gaudy numbers, and he's going to look like an MVP type of candidate. Like, he would have been like the dark horse. Like, if you're going to put any sort of money on, like, an outside the picture MVP candidate, like Matt Ryan made some sense to me. I didn't think they'd win enough games to get there, but when it comes to numbers, this guy was going to fill it up with all he had around him. And, I still like Calvin Ridley. I view him more as a high-end wide receiver, too. Like almost kind of like how people have talked about Juju Smith-Schuster in years past, where he's like a really good number 2. I think Calvin Ridley is an even better version of that. So maybe you could say he can be a wide receiver 1, but we'll find out this year. But I know he can be an elite number 2. And once you take Julio out of the picture, it's the opposite of what we were talking about with A.J. Brown. What does that mean for Calvin Ridley? Though that does bode well for Kyle Pitts, which, we'll talk about these two guys here very soon. So this is going to sound a little backwards here in a second. But for Matt Ryan, you're losing a guaranteed top 10 wide receiver when he's on the field, an A-caliber player, and now you're having question marks of who's filling in and who's going to take over those roles. So obviously, this is a loss for Matt Ryan. And overall, I think this is a pretty balanced trade. So the losers are kind of thin from who to pick from, but anytime you're a quarterback and you lose a wide receiver like Julio Jones, you can't sell me on that being a win. On to winner number 3. So again, this is where it's going to get a little weird. Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts. I know what you're saying. I view Ridley as a high-end wide receiver too, and Kyle Pitts is coming in. But for these two players' perspective, Julio leaving, I know he was injured last year, only played 9 games. But Ridley's target share went through the roof when Julio wasn't playing. And even when he was playing, because Julio was banged up and whatnot, it paid dividends to be Calvin Ridley, especially if you're a Calvin Ridley fantasy owner. Like, you were seeing all those targets go in his direction. And now he has an opportunity to prove himself as a wide receiver 1. Does he get there? We'll have to wait and see. Right now, I view him as a high-end wide receiver 2, but he might prove himself worthy of being the number 1 guy in an offense. And maybe that's what Arthur Smith's thinking. Maybe he's thinking, Julio doesn't want to be here. We don't need him. We got Calvin. And we drafted Kyle Pitts, who is such a versatile weapon. You can play him on the outside. You can play him in the slot, in line. You've heard all this before. So in a lot of ways, the selection of Kyle Pitts at number 4 gives you a player who can be as talented as Julio, and maybe even more of a mismatch problem than Julio ever was. And I mean, Julio caused plenty of headaches. He did everything but catch touchdowns. But I think Kyle Pitts, off the rip, will be one of the best red zone threats in the NFL. So you're gaining a strength you might not have had really in Julio. I think that's more on the Falcons' end, but regardless, numbers would suggest Pitts will be an improvement in that area. But also a guy who can literally just play all over, including the tight end position, which is not something you would have asked Julio Jones to do. So, it depends on how you're looking at this. So, like, Calvin Ridley, when it comes to fantasy perspective, solidified wide receiver 1. And maybe even just in regular football. This might be an opportunity. This is going to be a great opportunity for him to prove that, hey, I can be the alpha wide receiver in the NFL, so he wins there. And for Kyle Pitts, this is obviously more targets going your way. You're going to validate your production and your selection at the number 4 overall pick, and he might have a decent chance to come away with Offensive Rookie of the Year. We'll see how the QBs play out, and Pitts could be a few highlight plays away from really coming away with a strong case to win that award. I mean, I know it's hard for those awards to go to somebody other than a QB. I mean, last year, case in point, Justin Jefferson has the best receiving rookie season of all time, and Justin Herbert still wins the award. Like, that kind of encapsulates how tough it is to be a non-QB to come away with the award. But it's also something that's built around hype. And if Kyle Pitts goes out there and mosses a few folks, has a couple of multi-touchdown games, and maybe the Falcons are still competitive right around that 8-win mark, there might be a good case to it. Especially if the Falcons win more games than the Jags, then there might be, a pathway for Pitts to steal the award from a Lawrence or maybe even a Zach Wilson up in New York. Regardless, Ridley, Pitts, with Julio gone, their production goes up, so obviously they are winners from the trade. And our final loser, again, losers were kind of hard to find when it comes to this trade. You could say the Falcons because they have to move on from Julio Jones, but that kind of ties in with what I said about Matt Ryan, just, clump the Falcons organization in with all that. Additionally, it doesn't seem like he gave them much of a choice. It seemed like he wanted to be out, and then also their cap, you had to move on. They haven't signed their rookies because they can't afford it, so this was a move that kind of had to happen. They chose to extend Matt Ryan. Now that's, up for debate what you should have done there, but regardless, loser number 3, non-QBs above the age of 30. And it's kind of interesting. You look at, Stephon Diggs. He goes for a first-round pick, some mid-round pick swaps to go from Minnesota to Buffalo. The DeAndre Hopkins trade only ends up being, a second-round pick. David Johnson's in the mix. But it was such a low value for DeAndre Hopkins that everybody was slandering the Texans, saying that's an egregious value. So we would have agreed DeAndre Hopkins, below 30 years old, should have been worth at least one first-round pick, right? Same thing that the Bills gave up to get Stephon Diggs. Now you look at a wide receiver who is in that echelon. I think Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins are better than Julio, especially considering the injury histories of all 3 of these players. But Julio's still a top 10 wide receiver, but he's on the wrong side of 30. Therefore, he's a second-round pick, future third, or a third 2 years down the road. And there's going to be people who say, how is he not worth a first-round pick? But that crowd is much smaller than what it was with DeAndre Hopkins, or it's a smaller crowd also than for what people were saying Stephon Diggs was worth. If there was a crowd of people who said he's not worth a 1, that crowd is going to be smaller than the people who think Julio is a 1. I don't know if I'm really making sense with this, but anyways, I'll put some players up on the screen. Stephon Gilmore. This solidified. The Patriots are not getting a first-round pick for a guy who, talent-wise, might still be the best cornerback in football when he's healthy and playing at 100%. Akeem Hicks is one of the most dominant defensive ends in football. He stuffs the run like no other, and he brings about good pass rush production. And I threw Zach Ertz in here. I mean, that positional value, he'll never net a first-round pick, but still, all these players who are still playing at a super high level, maybe not Ertz as much, but Akeem Hicks is still one of the best defensive ends, especially stopping the run and fitting in a 3-4. Stephon Gilmore playing at 100%, one of the best cornerbacks in football. And these guys are all going to be valued around a second or lower. Gilmore's probably a second, Hicks might be less than that, and then Ertz is probably mid-round, maybe even day 3 type of value. And these are all guys who help your football team win right now. So think about what a second-round pick is in the eyes of draft season, right? Like someone like Nick Bolton. He's an undersized linebacker, and that's why he falls in the second round. And also the rise of Jamin Davis kind of knocks him aside. He was a second-round pick, and that might be, the pick that is given up to get Stephon Gilmore. I'm not saying the trade would be made by the Kansas City Chiefs, but think about it that way. A pick that eventually becomes an undersized linebacker could have introduced Stephon Gilmore, and it's because he's a non-quarterback and he's above the age of 30. Like, we're getting to Madden-type territory with how we view non-QBs over 30 years old. Like, it is unbelievable how much the league has, moved on that point. 10 years ago, Julio's a first-round pick, minimum. Like, he drives that bargain. It might be something that, in this case, Tennessee would have regretted down the line, but he would have cost a first-round pick, minimum, 10 years ago. But now, we take into factor of, injury history and, age. When do players normally fall off? We have so many numbers to back all these things up that Julio's value is depreciated, and I just find that all very interesting, as I've talked about it for a couple of minutes now. So you probably have a good idea that I'm way too curious about why that is. So regardless, that is my loser number 3, non-QBs over the age of 30. Kind of a stretch, but had to get creative to find a third loser from the Julio Jones trade. Comment your winners and losers down below in the comment section. I'd love to have your thoughts on the subject. Hopefully you did enjoy the video, and if you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more sports content in your life like this, please consider subscribing. That's all I got for you. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.
I'm part of the last generation that remembers time of God.